Welcome to month 9 of Cheshire Quilters Guild 2017 block of the month. This month's block is called Coxcomb. You need 3 fabrics for this block. From your fabric 3, you're going to need 1 3 3/4 by 3 3/4 inch square, 1 6-inch square. From your fabric 4, you're going to need 2 2 1/4 inch squares, and then you'll take a 6-inch square and you'll cut it twice along the diagonal, and for a single block you're only going to need 2 of these triangles rather. The other 2 triangles you can set aside for another project. And finally, from your last fabric, fabric 5, you're going to need 2 2 1/4 inch squares, 1 3 3/4 by 3 3/4 inch square, a 6-inch square, and finally a second 6-inch square, which you're going to cut along both diagonals to get 4 triangles. For a single block, you're only going to need 2 of these triangles. The center of our block is a 4-patch that's comprised of the fabric 4 and 5 2 1/4 inch squares that we cut. So let me stitch these into a 4-patch, and I'll meet you back here to show you what you have to do with that. Here's my 4-patch. And now I want to trim it to 3 3/4 by 3 3/4. It measures slightly larger than that now. So I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to half of 3 3/4 is 1 7/8, so I want to put 1 7/8 right on the on both sides of my ruler, right on the seam lines. And when I do that, I'll just have a little bit to trim off of every side, because I want that 4-patch seam to be exactly in the center. I've got to trim all 4 sides down to make it happen. And so once I trim one side, I should be able to put the 3 3/4 on the 2 edges I trimmed. My seam should be at the 1 7/8, and when I make this trim, I now have a 3 3/4 inch square 4-patch. We're going to make half square triangles out of our fabric 3 and 5 3 3/4 inch squares. Draw a line in the back of one of your squares. In this case, I decided to go ahead and draw the 2 lines a ½ inch apart, but you can just draw the single line down the diagonal, and we're going to sew on a 1/4 inch seam on either side of that line. Now that I've got the 2 seams stitched, I can just slice apart, and I will have my 2 half square triangles. Now it's very important that we not trim these down. We want to leave them as they are. The only thing left to do with these before we go to the next step is to press the seams toward the darker fabric, in this case our fabric 5. Next up is to make half square triangles using the fabric 3 and fabric 5 6-inch squares. Again, we're going to sew 2 seams and cut them apart to get our half square triangles. Again, it is very important, do not trim these half square triangles. Alright, so here's all our half square triangles. The the ones from the 6-inch squares and the ones from the 3 3/4 inch squares. Now that we have them made, what we're going to do is cut them in half. So we're going to take our ruler and line it up, put a line on your ruler along the seam line, and then line up your points as best you can. You might, depending on how straight you sewed the seam, you might have to angle your ruler a little bit relative to the 2 points. But basically we want to just cut this in half. Cut these in half rather, so that we get two kind of mirror image, because this one's got the triangle dark on the right and this one's got it on the left. Well, we want to do that with all of our half square triangles that we made in steps 2 and 3. And put the ones that match together. So those two are going to go together and these two are going to go together. And so let me finish cutting my triangles and I'll meet you back here. Here's our 4 patch. Now we pieced this with squares that were slightly oversized, so we have to trim it down to the exact size that we needed. Well, in the same way, we're going to start adding these half square triangles on, and they're slightly oversized. And so take a matching pair and we're going to sew them on, but we're not going to sew it on that side, we're going to sew it on this side, so that the fabric 5 patches are kind of alternating around the block. Once we get these two sewn on and pressed, you're going to press the seam toward these half square triangles away from the 4 patch. Then you're going to come along and add the other 2 small half square triangles on the other 2 sides, so that we've got kind of an alternating pattern with the fabric 5 fabric. Once we get those sewn on, we're going to trim this down to a 5-inch square. I'll meet you back here and show you what that looks like. So here's my 4 patch with the 4 half square triangle sewn on. I'm going to trim it down to 5-inch square. So I'm going to put the diagonal, the 45 of my ruler along seam line, and I'm going to center the 2.5-inch mark at the inner center of my 4 patch, and I should be able to line up. Then the 5-inch marks will be on the other diagonal seam. And if we trim this down, sorry for my arm, rotate it, those go on the 5 line of my ruler. Again, my center of my 4 patch should be at the 2.5-inch mark. And there we have step 5 complete. Now step 6, we're going to take our lonely little triangles that we cut from our 6-inch squares, and we're going to sew these on. The fabric 4 triangles will go against your fabric 5, and your fabric 5 triangles will go against your fabric 3. So we're going to make another square. Do the same thing, sew 2 sides on, press the seams out, sew the other 2 sides on, press the seams out, and then this we will trim to 6 7/8, and that's going to be a little more challenging to trim, but we can do it. Okay, there it is with our triangles sewn on, and we want to trim this again, like I said, to 6 7/8, which is just a little bit less than 7. So if we were trimming it to 7, then 3.5 would be our goal as far as lining up. But we want to be just a 1/16 of an inch less than that. So I'm just going to line my ruler up so that I'm halfway between the 3 3/8 and the 3.5 inch marks on all sides. So I'm going to put the lines across halfway between the 3.5 and the 3 3/8 marks. So just kind of even it out a little on both directions, both vertically and horizontally. And when I get it where it's pretty close that way, I'm going to trim 2 edges. And what you should notice is your points, your seams, are right at the 1/4 inch mark. So that's kind of another indicator that we've got it lined up correctly and that we've sewn it correctly. And then I turn it around, and now I want it to be 6 7/8. So not the 7 inch, but the 6 7/8 marks on my 2 sides I've trimmed already. And then I should be able to look in the middle and along the 2 seams and see the same alignment that I tried for before. And again, I can trim this off. I'm right at those 1/4 inch with the points, and that's our next round done. Isn't this a beautiful block? Last thing we need to do is put those, last thing we need to sew is to sew on the remaining half square triangles. And again, you want to alternate the fabrics. So here I've got fabric 5 against fabric 4, and then I'll put fabric 5 against fabric 4 this way also. And you see you've got these nice pattern of the fabric 3s on either side, and then the little strip of fabric 4 pieces in the middle. So let me sew these on and I'll be right back. Alright, there's my block all sewn. Now I just need to trim it down to 9.5 inches by 9.5 inches. I've got a 9.5 inch square ruler, which makes it really easy because I can put the very center of the ruler on the very center of the 4 patch, and I should be able to line up the center lines with my points. And I have a 45 along the diagonal, and I go trim, brush those out of the way, turn my block, put my ruler down again. Should be able to line everything up same way I did before, plus I have the edge of where I've trimmed already. And we do the second trim. Not quite. Sorry, this is a little awkward reaching around the tripod. Oops. And there you have it, Coxcomb, month 9 of the 2017 Cheshire Quilters Guild Block of the Month. See you back here next month where we start the quilt assembly and put the center of our quilts together. See you then.